One of the problems with recruiting for investment banking is not the knowledge or skills you acquire, but the access to talk with real investment bankers to put your best foot forward. Our sponsor, WSO Academy, can provide those connections with 60 head mentors who are finance professionals at top firms like Goldman, Centerview, and JP Morgan. Imagine being able to get on the phone within 24 hours with one of the Academy's 1,300 mentors right before a critical interview. Get on the waitlist for WSO Academy today by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting wallstreetoasis.com/academy. How does leverage impact the internal rate of return in a leveraged buyout? We'll find out today on Investment Banking Insights. All right. Welcome to Investment Banking Insights. My name is Alex Mason and I am your host. And this is the only show dedicated to helping you learn both the technical and non-technical aspects of the investment banking process. Hope you're doing incredible today. Oh my goodness. I sure hope that you got a little bit of a chance to rest, have a break. If you're listening from the United States or Canada and observe Thanksgiving holiday, I hope you had a great time. If you didn't, for whatever reason, I still hope you had an excellent last few days. I am back from a break and it just feels good. I'm back at home, back with my microphone and just feeling good about the week and what's to come for the rest of this season. So thank you for joining me. We're talking today about leveraged buyouts, and this is going to wrap up the section that we're doing on leveraged buyouts for now. Specifically, we want to understand how leverage impacts the IRR of an LBO. Now, in leveraged buyouts, the company making the acquisition, the private equity firm in this case, makes money by leveraging their capital to generate outsized returns. Now, the primary reason that private equity firms can make so much money is because they're primarily using other people's capital. So the return on their own money is much higher than it would be if they put up all the capital themselves. And to drive home this point, I want to talk through a basic example that I went ahead and put together for you. So let's say that a private equity firm raises $100 million for an acquisition, and they raise this money from a combination of debt investors as well as equity investors. And the private equity firm, let's say that they kick in $5 million of their own capital. The target is acquired, there's due diligence, the transaction goes through, and then boom, the leveraged buyout is done. Let's fast forward in time now. 5 years later, the business is worth more. The private equity firm has implemented some cost-cutting measures, some optimization, revenue has grown, profits have grown, and the business is sold for $200 million. Not bad, right? So the equity investors and the debt investors collectively share in over 95% of the profits because they put in the most money. Remember, we have the equity investors, the limited partners of the deal, the debt investors, aka the banks who lent the money, and then you've got the general partners who are the private equity firm associates or people who are putting in the money. Now, because they put in most of the money, the banks and the limited partners, equity partners, they get most of the profits of this. So with a total profit pie of $95 million, remember it costs $105 million to do the deal, and then the sale price was $200 million, so the profit is $95 million. Of that, percentage-wise, the equity and debt investors get just over 95%, which equates to $90.4 million of this. And if we look at the rate of return based on the initial capital invested, this is an internal rate of return of 13.7% annually, which is not bad. I mean, hey, they basically increase their money significantly in just a year or 5 years. So not too bad at all. Now, what about the private equity firm's capital? This is a little bit different. What does the private equity firm does typically is they collect fees for meeting a certain hurdle rate of return for their investments. And that would make this example a little bit more accurate and realistic, but also a little bit more complicated. So for the sake of this example, we're going to ignore those fees in order to keep the calculation simple. We're going to delve into a more complex example at some point in the future. But for now, let's just say that the private equity firm puts in their $5 million and look at their share of the profits from the sale, not including any sort of extra fees. So let's say their share of the profits was $4.6 million, which is based on the percentage of money that they invested in the deal. Now, $4.6 million, that's much less than the client's share of the profits on an absolute basis, but it's a huge return percentage-wise, because over a 5-year period, if we calculate the IRR of this investment, it equates to a 13.9% annual return, which is even higher than what their clients made. Now, why is this? Well, it's because the private equity firm used leverage. They didn't put in a lot of their own capital in order to make the deal happen. They make less money in absolute terms, but more money on a cash-on-cash basis, because guess what? They're getting the benefit of the scale of the deal. That's why they're making a little bit more. And of course, if you amplify the numbers even higher to another order of magnitude, the differences would be even more stark, just because of the leverage involved. So the moral of the story is that leverage increases returns. And again, I just made up this example and just did the calculations on my own real quick. I'm sure someone will double check me on the numbers, but that's the basic moral of the story, is that leverage increases returns. But that leads us to another question, an important question. Can you have too much leverage in a deal? Well, let's think about this, because theoretically, more leverage means greater returns because you are squeezing more output, that is more profit, from the deal while putting in less of your own money. But there are limits to this. If you saddle a corporation with too much debt, its cash flow may not be able to adequately support the interest payments. So think about that. If you have too much debt and the cash flow from the business cannot even support the interest payments, then the company is at risk, right? Because then you can't even pay your debt, and then that can trigger a whole bunch of negative events, ultimately potentially leading to default or bankruptcy. So generally, leverage increases the rate of return that you make on an investment, all else being equal, but there is a limit. Too much debt may mean the corporation isn't able to grow sufficiently enough to generate the EBITDA multiple required for a good exit. Because if all your money as a corporation is going towards interest payments, then you just won't be able to invest as much in growing the business itself. There's an opportunity cost there. And then also consider that too much debt might also mean that the purchase price of the business was too high to begin with, right? Because if you are funding an LBO and that acquisition is primarily being funded with debt, then the higher the purchase price, then that correlates with a bigger debt balance that you're borrowing. So it may mean your purchase price is too high, and a higher purchase price means lower returns. If you buy a business for $150 million, sell it for $200 million, you have a lower rate of return than if you bought it at a lower price. Let's say you bought it at $100 million and you sell it for that same $200. That's going to be a difference. So leverage increases returns, but only up until a point. There's maybe a sweet spot there. And it's something that you can incorporate in your modeling and something that you can think about with leverage buyouts. Okay, that's what I got for you today here on Investment Banking Insights. My name is Alex Mason. I am your host. It feels good to be back on the mic. And guess what? We did it. We did it. If you made it this far in the podcast, we have officially gone through every single technical question from the 400 guide. which is, let me see the total number of questions real quick. I've been tracking it this whole time as we've been going along. 232 technical questions, beginner and advanced questions across a range of subjects. And we've done it all. We've done it all. 255 episodes. And I just want to congratulate you for making it this far. If you've, as I know many of you have been, listening to every single episode, thank you for joining me on this portion of our journey together. And yeah, this just marks the end of one part of the podcast and the beginning of a new chapter in the podcast. So I'm excited about what's next. I'm going to be delving into some different topics, some older topics that we've already talked about. I'm going to be revisiting those periodically and just create more great content for you. So thanks for joining me so far with the show as we enter a new phase of the show, and I'll see you next time. Take care.